Dear learners, welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Prashant Kumar Gautam from University Institute of Hotel and Tourism Management, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Dear learners, today we shall be taking module titled Alternate Tourism under paper Special Interest Tourism. The learning objectives of this module are to know the meaning and definition of alternate tourism, define the scope of alternate tourism, know the distinguished features of alternate tourism, understand the significance of alternate tourism. Tourism industry is facing a lot of challenges due to the participation of the number of domestic as well as international tourism. The concept of tourism platforms given by Jafar Jafri in a research paper mentioned that in the advocacy platform, the countries were attracted towards the economic benefit of the tourism that resulted into the tremendous growth in tourist movement worldwide, and sooner the researches started showing the negative impacts in the societies caused due to the avarice of seeking monetary benefits through tourism industry. In the adaptancy platform, he urges that due to the negative impacts of tourism, some alternate forms of tourism was required which would have some fewer impacts than others. He favored those types of tourism which are amicable to the society, host community and their socio-cultural aspects. Artificial and natural environments which may offer new choices and rewarding experiences to the tourists. In this platform, some new concepts like indigenous forms of tourism, alternative form of tourism, appropriate forms of tourism, responsible form of tourism, sensitized form of tourism, green form of tourism, soft forms of tourism, cottage form of tourism, small scale forms, controls form and people to people form of tourism, they were introduced. These concepts are community centered, focusing on long-term benefits of tourism, easy to manage, non-destructive to local area and fauna and are giving a partial remedy against the negative impacts. So, the concept of alternative tourism is nothing but it has been evolved out of the negative impacts of the tourism caused due to mass tourism and felt by most of the countries. Why alternative tourism? The researchers have coined the concept of alternative tourism. There are many reasons for the existence of this term. I discussed above. The rise of the concept called alternative tourism has been emerged because of the recognition of the negative impacts of conventional form of tourism on society, culture and environment. Another reason for the flourishing of this concept is the ideologies associated with development like modernization, urbanization and capitalism, and in the last the conflict created by tourist activities in the indigenous culture. The biggest challenge in front of the society was the recognition of the rights of the indigenous local people and prepares them for upcoming changes in their religion, community and society caused due to introduction of tourism activities in the area. In many cases, we have seen that local communities never tolerate to see their culture contaminated with some different culture. Nidhi A. in 1994 is of opinion that the culture of tourism is considered as a new culture which is not an outcome of either the real culture of the local community or tourist itself, and often it has been a bone of contention between the host, population and guest on the issue of available resource consumption. In a nutshell, it can be concluded that alternative tourism was launched in the anticipation that it will put the things on right track which were out of the track globally due to faulty policy of tourism development and dreaming of reaping economic benefits. The launching of the term alternative tourism was supposed to contribute into creating an enriching relation between visitors and host population. It will respect and consider the dignity of both the parties mutually on the issue of religion, culture, social and physical environment. Defining alternative tourism. In a broad term, it can be defined as that type of tourism which are operational with the harmony of nature, society and community, and which allow both host and guest to interact in a positive manner and to share their experiences together. The term alternative tourism is an amalgam of tourism products and services which differs much from mass tourism in the area of supply, society and human resource. The concept of alternative tourism also includes the features like active tourism, explorer, committed tourism, etc. There are various examples of active forms of tourism such as rambling tourism, hiking tourism, trekking and biking as soft form of adventure tourism, snowing and skiing, mountaineering tourism, river rafting, water diving and skydiving, rock climbing as a hard form of adventure tourism. In these activities, tourist personally participates. That's why it has been put into the category of active tourism. The examples of explore-based alternative tourism are historically valued destinations, archaeological and museum sites, foreign culture, rural form of tourism, eco form of tourism, culture sites, fun and food tourism, indigenous cuisines, traditional folk music, folk and culture dances, art and crafts, etc. The committed tourism comes on the part of tourist when he or she does some charity work. The example include voluntary tourism offering services for any social cause, digging at archaeological sites, working in camps for social cause, movement for seeking justice, moving individually, for example, solitary form of tourism, religious tourism, etc. The word alternative tourism is synonym to commercial form of tourism which is normally small scale in nature and is focusing on minimal negative impacts on social, cultural and environmental aspects. There is another group of researchers who has come up with the concept that the term alternative is having double meaning because it is a fashionable idea emerges out of those who are not convinced with the encouragement of group tourism. They are also of this opinion that alternative has no clear definition. It lacks what it wants to convey to the society. In this regard, in 1988, an academic committee supported by UNWTO was deputed to check the reliability of the term alternative tourism, and they concluded with the report that this particular term is full of ambiguity and confusion because this has a variety of meaning to different users. There is a certain group of academicians who are of this faith that alternative form of tourism has a very close relationship with sustainable form of tourism. In wider concept, the concept of sustainable tourism fits appropriate and more meaningful term in comparison to alternative form of tourism. Forms of alternative tourism. The concept of alternative tourism in modern times is used as a synonym to sustainable tourism. Alternative tourism has been evolved out of the negative impacts of mass tourism and deals with cordial relationship between visitor and the local community. The main aim of participation in alternative form of tourism is to harm less the surroundings in which they are moving and roaming. To achieve this, they prefer to travel in sharing modes rather than opting for a personalized vehicle. They use the services offered to and by local residents and wants to stay in a natural and existing resources. Such type of tourism focuses on experiencing and getting insight into the way of life of indigenous people. Alternative form of tourism stresses on the holistic development of the destination. For example, balanced growth in the harmony with local environment and socio-cultural aspects. After analyzing the significance of alternative tourism, the researchers came out with many concepts in the pattern of alternative tourism with similar meaning and motive. The discussed below are some of the forms of alternative tourism. A. On the basis of activity-based tourism, it can be divided into endemic forms of tourism, experiencing travel, value additional travel, conservation form of tourism, soft form of adventure travel, responsiveness tourism, ecosystem museums, eco form of tourism, community-based tourism, rural form of tourism, indigenous form of tourism, farm-based tourism, and so many. B. On the basis of support services, there exists some form of tourism like home away from homestay, vacations at farmhouses, bed and breakfast establishment, guests and rest houses, natural history retreats, cottage-based stay, hunt-based lodges, and health-based farms. C. On the basis of management system, it can be divided into two parts, natural and cultural conservation. The management system emphasizes on the skillful use of resources so that benefits must be received by the host population and community in a long run. Beyond the above discussed nomenclatures, there are some other common concepts used in tourism industry in the pattern of alternative tourism. These concepts are more or less similar in nature to alternative forms of tourism and are discussed as 1. Pro-poor tourism. This approach of tourism focuses on the opportunities created by tourism and should occur to the locals in maximum possible manner. The crux of the story is that host population should be made participative in all tourism activities like planning and policy, creating markets for their indigenous products, economic gain, and commercial viability of the society. 2. Ethical tourism. Just to maintain social, cultural, and economic benefit for local and indigenous people, this concept was launched. The need of ethical tourism is also important because it protects destination from all types of malpractices practiced by tourists as well as host population. 3. Indigenous tourism. This type of tourism promotes the participation of local people in maintaining and conservation of typical local resources. 4. Rural tourism. In this form of tourism, tourist activities are taking place into certain areas which is an amalgam of natural and man-made forms of destination and taking about rich cultural heritage and local services offered by the natives. 5. Adventure tourism. This is a type of tourism in which high level of zeal, courage, enthusiasm, physical risk, education and nature contact is required. There are two types of adventure tourism prevailing in the world, hard and soft. The example of hard form of adventures are mountaineering, rafting, skydiving, scuba diving, parasailing, paragliding, etc. While bird watching, trekking, safaris, etc. are the examples of the soft form of adventure tourism. Some adventure tourism like bird watching is not possible without eco or national park. 6. Geotourism. This is a new concept in tourism initiated by National Geographic Society in 2002. According to them, the tourism which sustains, controls and enhances the geographical quality of a place which is being visited because of its rich environment, culture, local aesthetic touch, art and architecture and overall the well-being of its residents. 7. Ecotourism. This concept of tourism is meant for the nature-loving tourists. Those tourists who want to see performing wild animals, birds and flora into their natural habitat. These types of tourism is opt for them. 8. Community-based tourism. This is also a type of tourism which is known as alternative form of tourism and concentrates on participative activity in tourism. This concept has been evolved from the sustainable form of tourism and focuses on the benefits to be accrued to the local community where tourism activities are organized. Features of alternative tourism. The important features of alternative tourism are discussed as A. Alternative tourism concentrates on preservation, protection and enhancement of the resources which are an essential ingredient to tourist inflow. B. Alternative tourism is applied in a small and specific area which are managed, maintained and owned by local residents. C. Alternative tourism attracts journeys to remote and undisturbed natural areas with self-sustained with a motive to appreciate, study and enjoying the natural beauty and its indigenous cultural features. D. Alternative tourism focuses on sustainability of the resources and well-being of the local residents. E. Alternative tourism emphasizes over the ecological sustainability as well as cultural sustainability. For example, the tourism which does not harm local culture and creates a sense of respect to the indigenous culture. F. Alternative tourism talks about the minimal negative impacts on the environment and fostering in development in such areas which may soothe, synchronize and in harmony to the local features. Dear learners, let's have a look on the significance of alternative tourism. The significance of alternative tourism lies in the following facts. A. Alternative tourism emphasizes on the awareness of the local people and their way of life and preservation and conservation of their indigenous culture. B. Alternative tourism opens the path for several new forms of tourism, which are directly and indirectly contributing to sustainable growth of the societies in terms of economy and resource use. See, the concept of alternative form of tourism has become a center of attraction for small investors because of profitable investment opportunities available in this tourism sector and whose interest lies in this sector only. D. The alternative form of tourism is also important because it is considered as environmentally safe and viable for small communities. E. The alternative form of tourism provides an option to new destination to those tourists who do not want to visit a popular destination, or we can say that they do not want to be a part of mass tourism and travel individually or in a small group and focusing less on world-class comfort and ease. Introduction of alternative tourism as a policy matter to the market and challenges faced on implementation part. As we have seen that alternative tourism, because of its features, it is in high demand in tourism sector. Besides a lot of advantages, it has a wide range of criticism also. A group of intellectuals are of this opinion that there should not such concept called alternate tourism. Rather, it should be denoted with others' name like sustainable tourism, green tourism, wilderness tourism and so on. The other group of intellectuals are of view that the alternative form of tourism is an appropriate word and it is gaining popularity in the societies because of its positive contribution. However, it is a non-answered question how, when, where and what form of alternative tourism need to be implemented to the tourism markets. Local authorities are considered as the best placed agencies in managing tourism over any destination. National tourism organizations are responsible for sharing their advice and implementation part. In many countries, tourism boards are engaged in tourism formulation process and its implementation part. If we look back, the implementation of any policy or principle to a market is not a cup of tea for planners, but it is a rigorous process which is divided into the following steps. 1. Conceive of a plan. This step focuses on the collection of the necessary data regarding the negative impacts of tourism in the societies, their forms of negative impacts and the affected stakeholders. 2. Adoption. The policy is being implemented with the enforcement of law. This may include strictly followed do's and don'ts by the residents as well as guests. Strictly legislative and regulatory parts are to be maintained. 3. Integration. The integration of the public and private partnership is utmost required in policy formulation and its implementation. The Ministry of Tourism and Government of India need to join with the private operators to fulfill the objective. 4. Monitoring. Monitoring is required for a continuous evaluation of the project. This may include the analysis of impact on local culture, environment, tourist satisfaction, feasibility, and market. 5. Adjustment. The tourism plan should be adjustable and flexible to the time frame and should be as per the programs and plans. 6. Feedback or revision. All the plans should be open-ended, where everyone is free to share his or her views about the success or failures of the policy. Hence, there is a possibility of review and revision of the plan. Beyond above discussed points, there are few other components which are needed to be discussed. Policy must have defensive and corrective actions which are based on identification of the suitable condition helpful in making the policy successful. A policy must be confidential for its effective implementation. A series of questions related to the policy is to be prepared and should be directly associated with the stakeholders, implementation, action, and organizations responsible for implementation. Dear learners, let's have a look on barriers in implementing alternative forms of tourism as a policy matter. The policies are meant for implementation, and this implementation undoubtedly give results in the noble cause of the societies or direct beneficiaries. But there are some problems while implementing alternative tourism as a policy matter. These issues are discussed as 1. Political power and struggle. The country like India is facing this situation because government changes every 5 years. One government is coming out with a new tourism policy, the next government has some other priorities, giving less value to the earlier one, thus increasing the difficulties of implementing any policy related to alternate forms of tourism, for example, green tourism, sustainable tourism, and many more. 2. Change in priority. Another reason for declaring a policy flops or unproductive is its priority. Almost in every tourism policy, society and environment are the major concerns, while on implementation part, the major focus is on its economic contribution. The governments give priority to those policies which are related to economics. 3. Resistance to change. Another area of concern is the local population, who always reacts with the new guidelines implemented for their well-being. It has been observed in India that when National Green Tribunal came out with strict norms to save environment, which came up with certain plans from solid waste management, pollution, making river beds free from all permanent establishment, it was the local residents, hoteliers and other beneficiaries who opposed the working of NGT. 4. Short-term objectives. The policies should be made for long-term benefit rather than short-term. This results in a negative feedback from the stakeholders. 5. Copycat approach. The government brings any tourism policy without studying the need of the stakeholders. It just uses a copycat approach to fulfill the minimum standards of the destination without caring the climate, resources and proper study of the outcome of the implementation of policy. It does not mean that a policy which has given the satisfactory result in any world will have the same impact on the other destinations as well. 6. Mismatch in demand and supply. The policies laid the foundations of tourism development in India, and as a result, more tourism suppliers came into existence. But the decline in tourist traffic has compelled the government to withdraw the policy from immediate effect. 7. Difference between well-developed and underdeveloped destination. Majority of the policies fall in the category of frameworks, which are designed for separate category of destinations and products. There are a clear-cut framework designed for a new or developing destination, while separate framework for developed or mature destination. This creates a lot of confusion on the implementation part because no destination is a new destination and no destination is a mature destination here in India. 8. Local support. Policies may be formulated and guidelines may be designed by the national government, but when it comes implementation part, it is the local government who is responsible for. It has been observed that central government and state government do not fall in the same ruling party. And as a result, the policies are kept into the files rather than giving them a ground reality. In majority of cases, tourism has not been considered as a tool to economic growth by many states in India till 2007. If tourism is not going to be considered as major source of economic growth, till then no tourism policy will give desired results. 9. Communitarians. Another important problem faced on the part of policy implementation is communitarians, because the conflicts are aroused due to the resource sharing issues and traditional economic development for the societies. The communitarians believe that what is being given to the society in total will not give desired result for everyone in the society. These are some of the common barriers in implementation of tourism policies associated with alternative tourism. Sustainable tourism, eco-tourism, carrying capacity, environment impact, and many more. Dear learners, let's summarize this module. Alternative form of tourism has been emerged out of the massive negative impacts of mass tourism on society, culture, economics, and environment. The policymakers came out with a new concept called alternative form of tourism, whose primary motive is to minimize the negative impacts of conventional form of tourism in the societies. Though this concept is controversial in nature, because a segment of scholars are of view that this form of tourism has nothing to do with the sustainability. In contrary, it is full of ambiguity and confusion, because this has a variety of meaning to different users. There is certain group of academicians who is of this faith that alternative form of tourism has a very close relationship with sustainable form of tourism. There are many forms of alternate tourism like pro-poor tourism, ethical tourism, indigenous tourism, rural tourism, adventure tourism, geotourism, eco-based tourism, community participation tourism, and many more. The focus of alternative form of tourism is to preserve, protect, and enhancement of the resource. It is applied to small and specific areas which are maintained by the local population and are prevailing as natural beauty and indigenous culture to minimize negative impact on environment and boost sustainable development in the harmony of local culture. The implementation of alternative form of tourism as a policy is required by doing certain homework and discussing major areas of concern. Thank you.